Have you ever seen your name pop up in a group chat you were never invited to, only to realize your entire family has been using your failures as entertainment for 7 years? I woke up to 913 unread messages in a group named Bloodline Only. They called me the charity case. They placed bets on my financial collapse and gambled on the exact date my husband would leave me. I screenshotted every single word. My name is Isla Simmons, and up until 11:43 on a Tuesday night, I thought my family was just distant, not malicious. I was lying in bed, the blue light of my phone the only thing cutting through the darkness of the master bedroom. Beside me, my husband Xavier was breathing in that heavy, rhythmic way that signifies deep sleep, totally oblivious to the fact that my entire world was about to fracture. The notification slid down from the top of my screen like a silent guillotine. You have been added to Bloodline Only. My thumb hovered over the glass. It was a mistake. It had to be. My mother, Carol, or perhaps my sister, Bree, must have fat-fingered my contact while trying to add someone else. Maybe a cousin, maybe a lawyer. I stared at the group name, Bloodline Only. The title itself was a gate, a heavy iron thing meant to keep people out. Specifically, people like me. I clicked on it, expecting to see a frantic, "Oops, sorry, Isla, wrong chat," or perhaps just a quick removal notification before I could even load the history. But nothing happened. The chat remained open, silent. I looked at the top of the screen. 913 unread messages. My breath hitched in my throat. This was not a new group created for a sudden emergency. This was an archive. I scrolled up. I kept scrolling. The timestamps rolled back like a odometer in reverse. Last week, last month, last Christmas, 2 years ago, 4 years ago. My thumb was flying now, friction burning the tip of my finger, until I hit the very top. The group was created 7 years ago. The date was burned into my retinas. It was the same week I had packed up my small apartment in the city, broken my lease, and moved back to Cedar Hollow to take care of Grandma Marlene after her first heart scare. It was the week I decided to sacrifice my career progression to be the dutiful granddaughter, the one who cooked the soup and managed the pill organizers. I read the very first message, sent by my sister Bree, finally a place to talk where the charity case won't see. There it was, my nickname, not Isla, not sister, not daughter, the charity case. It was capitalized like a proper noun, a title bestowed upon me with formal malice. I felt a physical blow to my chest, cold and sharp, but I did not cry. I did not wake Xavier. A strange, icy clarity washed over me, the kind that usually only kicked in when I was handling a crisis file at work. I sat up against the headboard, pulled the duvet up to my chin, and began to read. I read for an hour. The chat was a living, breathing ecosystem of resentment. It was where they came to vent, but not about politics or the weather. They vented about me. It was a digital diary of every perceived slight, every moment of my life twisted into a narrative of failure. They had betting pools, actual, monetized gambling rings centered on my misery. I found a thread from 3 years ago, titled "The Job Hunt." $50 says she asks mom for rent money by November. Bree had typed, "I will take that action." My cousin Mark replied, "She is too proud. She will eat ramen in the dark before she asks. Put me down for December." She is not proud. My mother, Carol, had written, "She is just manipulative. She wants us to offer so she does not have to ask. Don't fall for the sad eyes." I remembered that November. I had lost a contract. I was terrified. I had eaten ramen. I had kept the heat low. And when I went to family Thanksgiving, I had worn my best sweater and smiled until my face hurt, terrified they would see my struggle. They had seen it. All right. They had seen it and placed wagers on it. I scrolled down to the marriage season. This hurt worse than the money comments. The money comments were just classist cruelty, typical of people who measured worth in net assets. The marriage comments were personal. They dissected my relationship with Xavier with the precision of butchers. How long before Xavier realizes he married a sinking ship? Bree asked 2 years ago. He is a saint for putting up with her neurotic need for approval. Mom replied, I give it 5 years. Max. He deserves better. Another aunt chimed in. He has that look in his eyes, the look of a man who knows he's settled. I looked over at Xavier, sleeping soundly beside me. His arm was thrown over his eyes, his chest rising and falling. Did he have that look? Did they see something I refused to see? Or were they projecting their own disdain onto him? Then I saw it, a message from 6 months ago. Xavier said she is cracking under the pressure, said she cried over spilled milk yesterday. Literally. I froze. I remembered that day. I had dropped a carton of almond milk. It had exploded all over the kitchen floor, seeping into the grout, and I had just sat down and wept. It wasn't about the milk. It was about the exhaustion, the caretaking, the feeling that I was running on a treadmill that was slowly increasing in speed. Xavier had come in, held me, and cleaned it up. He had told me it was okay. He had been so gentle. But according to this text, he had reported it. Xavier said, the phrasing implied familiarity. It implied a back channel. It implied that my husband, the man I shared a bed with, was a source. He was the mole. They were mining him for data to fuel their ridicule. I felt bile rise in my throat. I swallowed it down. No, not now. If I woke him up and screamed, I would just be the hysterical charity case they all believed me to be. I would be proving them right. Look at Isla. Losing her mind again. I needed to be smarter. I needed to be colder. I swiped out of the chat for a split second to open my cloud storage app. I created a new folder. I named it Receipts. Then I created subfolders: Financial Defamation, Character Assassination, Conspiracy, Xavier. I went back to the chat. I started screenshotting. I worked with the efficiency of a forensic accountant. I did not just take pictures. I captured context. I captured dates. I captured the reactions, the laughing emojis attached to my failures, the thumbs-up emojis attached to my pain. I made sure the names were visible at the top of every image. I found the most recent thread, the one that must have been active when they accidentally added me. They were discussing the upcoming weekend, the legacy dinner. Grandma Marlene had invited me weeks ago. She had called me herself, which was rare. Usually, information filtered through Mom, diluted and distorted. But Grandma had been clear. Be there. Isla. I assumed it was a birthday celebration, or perhaps just a family reunion. The chat revealed the truth. We need to make sure the photographer gets the shots of just the bloodline. Bree wrote, if Isla tries to squeeze into the center, just elbow her out. We need clean shots for the announcement. What time is the notary coming? Mom asked. 5:30, Bree replied. Before dinner, we get the papers signed while Grandma is fresh. Then we read the big one. Does Isla know? Mark asked. Of course not. Mom wrote, she thinks it is a party. If she knew we were restructuring the trust, she would be buzzing around Grandma like a fly. We need to keep her occupied in the kitchen until the signing is done. She is good at serving drinks. Bree added with a crying laughing emoji. Let her play waitress. It is what she is made for. My hands were trembling, not from sadness, but from a rage so pure it felt like a drug. They were not just mocking me. They were planning a coup. They were planning to isolate Grandma Marlene, manipulate her into signing documents, and cut me out completely, all while I served them appetizers. They viewed me not as a family member, but as an obstacle to be managed, a servant to be utilized, and a joke to be laughed at. I looked at the timestamp of the last message, 11:41 at night. Did anyone send the invite to the photographer? Bree asked. And then, nothing. That was likely when she went to add the photographer or the notary and her finger slipped. She had added Isla Simmons instead. And because it was late, and because they were likely drunk on their own arrogance or wine, no one had noticed. They had put their phones down, satisfied with their plotting, and gone to sleep. I had everything. I had 7 years of abuse documented, categorized, and backed up to 3 different servers. I had proof of their plans for Grandma. I had proof of their cruelty. I had proof of Xavier's loose tongue. I looked at the number of screenshots in my folder, 412 images. I could just leave. I could delete the chat and pretend I never saw it. protect my heart from further damage. But the woman who would have done that, the woman who cried over spilled milk and desperately sought their approval, had died about 40 minutes ago. I was not that woman anymore. I was the charity case. And if I was a charity case, it was time to show them exactly how expensive I could be. I opened the text box. My fingers hovered over the keys. I thought about writing a paragraph. I thought about screaming in all caps. I thought about listing their crimes one by one, but words were wasted on people who did not listen. They dealt in transactions. They dealt in leverage. I needed to give them a receipt. I typed 5 words. Thanks for the receipts. I hit send. Then, without hesitating for a single second, I hit the button to leave the group. You have left Bloodline Only. I placed the phone on the nightstand. Screen up. For 3 seconds. Nothing happened. The house was silent. The world was still. Then, the screen lit up. Bree calling. I watched it ring. The vibration buzzed against the wood of the nightstand. A harsh, angry sound. I did not touch it. The ringing stopped. Then a text notification popped up. Isla. Wait, it is not what you think. Then another. Pick up the phone. Then Mom. Mom calling. I let it ring. The room filled with the ghostly white glow of the screen. Pulsing with their panic. They were awake now. The alcohol had evaporated. The arrogance had been replaced by the terrified realization that the one person they had underestimated for 7 years was now holding the gun. Xavier shifted in his sleep, groaning slightly, disturbed by the buzzing. I reached out and silenced the phone, flipping it face down. I lay back in the dark, my eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling fan. My heart was beating slow and steady, a war drum in the silence. I was not going to answer. I was not going to give them the satisfaction of an explanation, or a fight, or a tear. Let them sweat. Let them wonder how much I had seen. Let them wonder which screenshots I had taken. Let them drive themselves mad trying to remember what they had written in 2019 or 2022 or yesterday. The legacy dinner was in 4 days. I closed my eyes. I would be there, and I would not be serving drinks. To understand why I did not simply block them all and go back to sleep, you have to go back 6 weeks. You have to understand the specific texture of the silence that usually surrounded my relationship with the heart matriarchy, and how violently that silence was broken at 6:45 in the morning. It was a Tuesday, much like the one where I found the group chat, but the sun was actually up. My phone vibrated against the wood of the nightstand. A long, sustained buzz that signaled a call rather than a text. I fumbled for it, eyes half glued shut, expecting an emergency. At that hour, calls usually meant accidents, hospitals, or the police. I saw the caller ID Grandma Marlene. My stomach dropped. I sat up, clearing my throat instantly. Hello, Grandma. Is everything okay? Her voice came through clear, devoid of the morning grogginess I was fighting. It was sharp, the way it used to be before the atrial fibrillation started slowing her down. I am fine, Isla, she said. I am better than fine. I am lucid. Are you up? I am now, I said, swinging my legs out of bed. Do you need me to come over? Did the furnace go out again? No, she said, and I could hear the distinct sound of a metal spoon stirring porcelain in the background. She was having her tea. I am calling because I know if I tell your mother to invite you, she will tell you the wrong time, or she will tell you it is just a casual drop-in, or she will forget altogether until the morning of... I froze. It was the first time she had acknowledged the filter. For years, I had assumed Grandma just didn't care about the logistics, that she left the social calendar to my mother. Carol, because it was easier, I am hosting a dinner, Marlene continued. In 6 weeks, the second Saturday of the month, I am calling it the Legacy Dinner. The Legacy Dinner. It sounded formal, heavy. Okay, I said, grabbing a pen from the nightstand and writing it on the back of a utility bill. Can I bring anything? Do you need help with the catering? I can come early to set up? No, she said firmly. You are always setting up. Isla, you are always in the kitchen or running to the store for ice. This time, I hired a service. I want you to be a guest, and I want you to be on time. I will be there. I promised. And Isla. Yes, Grandma. Stay until the end, she said. Her voice dropped an octave, losing its briskness and settling into something graver. Do not let Carol rush you out. Do not let Bree tell you that I am tired and need to sleep. I want you to hear what I have to say from my mouth, not theirs. The line clicked dead before I could ask what she meant. I sat there on the edge of the bed, holding the phone, staring at the dust motes dancing in the shaft of sunlight coming through the blinds. That call was the anomaly. The reality of the last 8 years was something entirely different. For nearly a decade, my life had been calibrated to the rhythm of Cedar Hollow. It is a 40-minute drive from my apartment, mostly highway, passing strip malls that slowly give way to wooded lots and older colonial-style houses. I knew every pothole on that route. I knew the route because I drove it 3 times a week. When Grandma was diagnosed with a heart condition, the family chat, the official one, not the Bloodline Only pit of vipers I had not known about, lit up with prayers and heart emojis. My mother posted a long, emotional paragraph on Facebook about the resilience of women. Bree posted a throwback photo of her and Grandma eating ice cream. But when the dust settled, and the actual work began, the room cleared out. I became the designated driver for every cardiology appointment. I was the one sitting in the waiting rooms that smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee. Reading year-old magazines while Grandma went through stress tests. I was the one who learned the difference between her beta blockers and her blood thinners. I remember one winter afternoon clearly. It was 2 years ago. A snowstorm had hit, dumping 6 inches on Cedar Hollow. Grandma called, panicked, because her front walkway was iced over and she needed to get the mail. I left work early. I drove 40 minutes in a sedan that handled snow like a shopping cart. I spent an hour chipping ice and shoveling the driveway until my fingers were numb inside my gloves. When I finally came inside to warm up, I found Bree sitting at the kitchen table. She was drinking hot cocoa. She was wearing a perfectly matching cream-colored lounge set. "Oh, hey Isla," she had said, not looking up from her phone. "I didn't know you were coming. I just stopped by to drop off a Christmas card and take some photos for the holiday album." She had been there the whole time. She had watched me shovel from the window. I remember standing there, dripping melting snow onto the linoleum, my back aching. "Why didn't you help?" I wanted to ask. Or at least, why didn't you tell me you were here so I didn't have to drive 40 minutes in a blizzard? But I didn't. I just smiled. That weak, apologetic smile I had perfected. "Oh, that is nice, Bree. Grandma loves your photos." That was the dynamic. I did the maintenance. They did the marketing. I spent my Sundays filling plastic pill organizers, sorting the tiny yellow and white tablets so Grandma wouldn't overdose. I unclogged the bathroom sink. I negotiated with the insurance companies when they tried to deny her coverage. I sat with her on the nights she felt the heavy, suffocating weight of loneliness, listening to the same stories about Grandpa for the 100th time. And then, there was the legacy of my mother and sister. They showed up for the birthdays. They showed up when the garden was in full bloom and the lighting was good. They brought expensive, useless gifts, silk scarves. Grandma never wore glass figurines that just gathered dust while I brought groceries and compression socks. I used to tell myself it was just a personality difference. Mom is not good with medical stuff. I would tell Xavier. Bree is just young. She is busy with her career. I made excuses for them. I built a fortress of rationalization to protect myself from the truth. I told myself that they loved Grandma in their own way, and that my role as the caretaker was a privilege, not a burden. I told myself I wasn't being used, but looking back, the sediment was there. It was building up in the pipes, layer by layer, the snubbed invitations, the way conversations stopped when I walked into a room, the way they would exchange glances quick, amused looks when I offered to handle a problem. I walked out to the kitchen that morning 6 weeks ago, the memory of Grandma's phone call still buzzing in my head. Xavier was making coffee. He looked the part of the perfect husband, hair slightly messy, wearing the flannel pajama pants I had bought him for Christmas. "Good morning," he said, pouring a cup and sliding it across the island to me. "You were up early. Who called Grandma?" I said. wrapping my hands around the warm mug. She invited us to a dinner, a legacy dinner. Legacy dinner. Xavier raised an eyebrow. Sounds intense. Is she finally dividing up the silver? He laughed. But it felt thin. She sounded serious. I said, she told me to make sure I stayed until the end. She said she wanted me to hear something from her directly. Xavier turned back to the counter to butter a bagel. That is nice, babe. She probably just wants to make a speech. You know how old people get sentimental. I hesitated. I watched his back, the slope of his shoulders, the way he moved with an easy confidence that I had always admired. Xavier, I asked, keeping my voice casual. Have you talked to my mom lately? He paused. The knife stopped moving across the bagel for a fraction of a second. Just a hitch. If I hadn't been looking for it, I would have missed it. Your mom? No. Why would I? Unless you count her commenting on my LinkedIn post last week. Why, I don't know, I said. Grandma made it sound like Mom might try to keep me away, or that there is something going on that I don't know about. Xavier turned around, smiling. That handsome, reassuring smile that had anchored me for 5 years. Isla, you are overthinking it. You always do. Your family is a little dysfunctional. Sure, but they aren't villains. Your mom is just disorganized. And Bree as well. Bree is Bree. Don't read into it. He took a bite of his bagel. Leaning against the counter, he looked so relaxed, so open. Then, his phone, which was sitting face up on the counter next to him, lit up with a notification. I couldn't read the text from where I was standing, but I saw the bubble. Xavier's hand moved. It wasn't a frantic snatch. It was smooth, casual. He reached out, tapped the side button to lock the screen, and then flipped the phone face down. It was a muscle memory action. Automatic. My heart gave a strange little stutter. Xavier never hid his phone. We knew each other's passcodes. We used each other's devices to order takeout or look up directions. The locking. The flipping was new. Who was that, I asked. Work, he said, his mouth full. Just Dave asking about the schedule. Dave? Sure. I took a sip of my coffee, but it tasted bitter. The doubt that had been a whisper was starting to scream. Why would Grandma call me at 6:45 in the morning to bypass Mom? Why would she warn me? And why did my husband, the man who held me while I cried over my family's neglect, just flip his phone over like he had something to hide? I didn't press him. I didn't ask to see the message. I wasn't ready to know. Not then. I was still the Isla who wanted to believe. I was still the Isla who thought that if I just loved harder, worked harder, and forgave faster, everything would eventually click into place. But as I stood there in the kitchen, watching the morning sun hit the appliances we were still paying off, I made a decision. I was going to that dinner. I wasn't going to help. I wasn't going to serve. I wasn't going to bring the ice. I was going because Grandma Marlene, the one person in this entire bloodline who had ever looked at me and seen a human being rather than a utility, had asked me to. I looked at Xavier. We should dress up, I said. He smiled. But this time, the smile didn't reach his eyes. It sat on his face like a mask. Sure, babe, whatever you want. I didn't know then that he was already texting them. I didn't know that while I was standing there worrying about dress codes, he was likely typing a message to Bree saying, she knows about the dinner, damage control. All I knew was that for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to a family event hoping to be included. I was going to investigate, and now, 6 weeks later, staring at 913 messages that confirmed every paranoia I had ever suppressed, I realized that the investigation was over. The trial was about to begin. I finally put the phone down on the nightstand. The screen was dark. The house was quiet, but inside my head, the noise was deafening. I replayed that moment in the kitchen, the phone flip, the lie about Dave. It wasn't just a group chat. It wasn't just mean girls from high school who happened to be my mother and sister. It was a conspiracy. And my husband was not a bystander. He was a participant. I pulled the covers up. I needed to sleep. I needed to look fresh. Because when I walked into that house in Cedar Hollow in 4 days, I needed to be sharper than I had ever been. I needed to be the person Grandma thought I was. Not the charity case they claimed I was. I closed my eyes, but I didn't see darkness. I saw the road to Cedar Hollow. I saw the snow on the driveway. I saw Bree drinking cocoa. And I saw the text message I had just read an hour ago. Xavier is handling her. I let out a slow, shaky breath. Handle me. Then, Xavier. Let's see how that works out for you. To understand why the nickname, the charity case, stuck with such adhesive power. You have to understand the geography of my childhood. I was not born into the comfort that Bree enjoyed. I was the product of my mother's first act, the struggle years. My biological father left when I was 3, leaving behind a stack of unpaid bills and a sedan that leaked oil. My mother, Carol, was different then. She was harder, sharper, a woman constantly doing arithmetic in her head to see if we could afford milk. But then she met Bree's father. He was stable. He was kind in a distant, check-writing sort of way, and when they married, we moved into a new construction in a zip code that required a gate code to enter. I was 10. Bree was on the way. Suddenly, the narrative of our lives changed. The struggle years were erased. My mother reinvented herself as a woman of leisure, a woman who lunched, a woman who had always belonged to the country club set. But I was the glitch in her new operating system. I looked like my father. I had memories of the bad apartment. I was walking, breathing evidence that she hadn't always been Mrs. Simmons of Cedar Hollow. I became the old furniture in a newly decorated house. Bree was born into the light. She was the child of the success. She was the golden child. Not because she was extraordinary, but because she represented the life my mother wanted to project. I, on the other hand, was the reminder of the life she wanted to bury. Grandma Marlene was the only one who didn't participate in this revisionist history. To her, I wasn't an embarrassing artifact when she came over for Sunday dinners. While Mom was fussing over Bree's ribbons and correcting my table manners with a tight, pained smile, Grandma would reach under the table and squeeze my hand. "How is my girl?" she would ask. Not Isla, not her, my girl. It was a claim of ownership. It was her way of saying, "I see you," even if they are trying to edit you out. The term charity case was not coined in a vacuum. It was born the summer I turned 19. I had been working double shifts at a diner to save for college because stepdad, generous as he was with the mortgage, had made it clear that higher education is a personal investment. Bree, of course, would later get a fully funded ride from the bank of Dad for a liberal arts degree she never used. But for me, the rules were different. I applied for a competitive hardship scholarship. It was based on merit, grades, and financial independence. I wrote an essay about growing up in a single-parent household before the remarriage. I wrote about the reality of those early years. I won. It was a full ride. I remember running home, the acceptance letter crumpling in my sweaty fist, bursting with a pride so bright it almost hurt. I ran into the kitchen where Mom and a teenage Bree were looking at catalogs. "I got it," I gasped. "I got the scholarship. I am going to university. It is fully paid." Mom took the letter. She read it. She didn't smile. She didn't hug me. She looked at the header, then looked at me with an expression that sat somewhere between pity and distaste. "Oh," she said. "This is one of those equity grants, the ones they give to underprivileged cases, to meet a quota." She handed the paper back to me like it was a dirty tissue. "Well," she added, turning back to her catalog, "I suppose it is good that someone took pity on your situation. Just don't go bragging about it to the neighbors. We don't want them thinking we can't afford to send you ourselves. It makes us look like a charity case." There it was, the baptism, Bree, sitting there with her perfect teeth and her private school uniform, laughed. It wasn't a malicious laugh. Not yet. It was just an echo of Mom. "Yeah, Isla, the charity case." From that day on, every success I achieved was filtered through that lens. When I graduated with honors, the professors probably graded on a curve for the scholarship kids. When I got my first job at the county office, affirmative action hire. When I bought my own used car, it looks like something someone donated. They refused to grant me agency. If I succeeded, It was because the world pitied me. If I failed, it was because I was naturally defective. I reacted the way many unloved children react. I became hyper-independent. I stopped asking for things. I stopped sharing news. I built a wall of competence so high, I thought they couldn't scale it. I worked through college. I paid my own rent. I never asked them for a loan, a reference, or a favor. I thought this would earn their respect. I thought if I showed them I needed nothing, they would finally see me as an equal. I was wrong. My independence didn't impress them. It insulted them. By not needing them, I deprived them of the power to deny me, by not asking for money. I ruined their ability to feel benevolent. In the group chat, I found a conversation from 4 years ago, right after I had declined Mom's offer to pay for a consultation with her stylist because she thought my work clothes were drab. She is so arrogant. Mom had typed, "I offer to help her look presentable, and she acts like she is too good for my money. She loves playing the martyr. She wants to look poor so people feel sorry for her. It is her brand. Let her look like a librarian," Bree had replied. It fits the charity case aesthetic, but the cruelty reached a new, suffocating altitude when I met Xavier. Xavier Cole was not part of their script for me. He was successful, handsome, kind, and came from a family that didn't treat dinner conversation like a blood sport. When I brought him home the first time, I saw the confusion on their faces. They couldn't understand the physics of it. Why would a man like him choose a woman like me? They concluded, naturally, that it was temporary. In the bloodline. Only logs. Their skepticism was documented with brutal clarity. He is going to wake up one day and realize she is exhausting. Bree wrote after our engagement party, "He is in the rescue phase. Men like that love a project. Once he fixes her up and realizes she is still broken inside. He will walk. I give it 2 years. Mom bet. 3 if she gets pregnant to trap him." And that brings me to the wound that was still bleeding as I sat in the dark. The baby. Xavier and I had been trying for 3 years. It was a silent, private hell. The negative tests, the temperature tracking, the monthly heartbreak that we kept between the walls of our bedroom. We didn't tell anyone. We didn't want the pity, but somehow, they knew. Maybe I looked tired. Maybe I declined a glass of wine at Christmas and then had one the next month. Maybe Xavier, my traitorous husband, had mentioned we were working on it during one of his secret back-channel chats. I found a thread from last Christmas. Isla looks haggard. Bree wrote, "Still no baby bump. TikTok. It is for the best." Mom replied, "Honestly, can you imagine her as a mother? She can barely manage her own anxiety. A child would break her." Plus, Bree added, and this was the sentence that made my vision blur. "Think of the money we save. If she has a kid, we have to buy gifts for 18 years. If she is barren, we save at least $500 a year. It is practically an investment strategy." "Lol," Mom replied. "True, no grandkid from her means less obligation for me. I am too young to be a grandma twice over anyway. I read that exchange 3 times. They weren't just indifferent to my pain. They were calculating the return on investment of my infertility. They viewed the potential life of my child not as a joy, but as a budget line item they were relieved to delete. This was the family I had spent 7 years trying to please, and through all of this, through the scholarship insults and the marriage bets and the baby mockery, I never told Grandma Marlene, not once. I swallowed it. When Grandma asked why Mom didn't come to my graduation, I lied and said Mom had a migraine. When Grandma asked why Bree made a snide comment at Thanksgiving, I laughed it off and said Bree was just stressed about work. I protected Grandma from the truth of her own daughter and granddaughter. I didn't want to break her heart. I didn't want her to know that the family she prided herself on was actually a nest of vipers who fed on the weakest member. I didn't want her to feel the guilt of having raised a bully. So I played the role. I absorbed the toxicity so she could enjoy the illusion of harmony. I let them call me the charity case in whispers so she could call me my girl out loud. It is ironic. Really. My job at the West Bridge Family Services Authority is to manage crisis files. I deal with families that are imploding custody battles, intervention orders, financial ruin. I sit across from people who are screaming at each other, people who have thrown lamps and burned bridges. I am good at it. I am calm. I am objective. I can look at a shattered family and see the path to resolution. I can spot the manipulator in the room within 5 minutes. But when I went home, I lost all that clarity. I couldn't see that I was living in a case file of my own. I couldn't see that the emotional abuse I was documenting for strangers was happening at my own dining table. I thought I was being noble by enduring it. I thought I was being the bigger person. Reading the chat log changed that definition. I wasn't being the bigger person. I was being the punching bag. The charity case wasn't a nickname. It was a containment strategy. By labeling me as the pathetic one, the needy one, the one who required their tolerance, they elevated themselves. Bree felt successful because she wasn't me. Mom felt aristocratic because she wasn't me. They needed me to be the failure so they could be the winners. If I succeeded, if I was happy, if I was strong, their entire hierarchy collapsed. If the charity case didn't need their charity, then who were they? Just mean? Empty women with too much time and not enough soul. I sat there in the dark, the term rolling around in my mouth like a stone. Charity case. They thought it meant I was weak. They thought it meant I was dependent. But charity has another definition. Charity is what you give to those who cannot survive on their own. And looking at the texts, looking at their desperate need to pull me down to feel tall, I realized something. I wasn't the one who needed them. They needed me. They needed my submission to fuel their egos. They were the ones begging for a handout of self-esteem, and I'd been feeding them for years by staying small. That ended tonight. The charity case was closed. I stood up and walked to the closet. I pulled out the dress I had bought for the legacy dinner. It was not the modest, blend into the wallpaper beige dress I usually wore to appease Mom. It was navy blue, sharp, tailored, a dress that looked like it belonged to a woman who signed checks, not one who begged for them. I hung it on the door of the wardrobe so it would be the first thing I saw when I woke up. Then I looked at Xavier, still sleeping, still guarding his locked phone, even in his dreams. He had bet against me too. He had joined the winning team because he was a coward who liked the path of least resistance. He thought the charity case would never find out, and even if she did, she would be too grateful for his love to do anything about it. I touched the screen of my phone one last time, ensuring the cloud backup was complete at 100%. I didn't cry for the baby I didn't have. I didn't cry for the mother I didn't have. I went to the bathroom, washed my face with cold water, and looked at myself in the mirror. The eyes staring back were not the eyes of a victim. They were the eyes of a caseworker who had just finalized the evidence list. I turned off the light. The emotional autopsy was finished. Now, it was time to prepare the prosecution. The silence in the bedroom was heavy, a suffocating blanket that seemed to press down on my chest. But my mind was racing at a velocity that made sleep impossible. I had left the group. I had silenced the notifications. But the data, the 913 messages, was already harvested. It was sitting in the cloud, waiting for me to dissect it. I slipped out of bed. Xavier did not move. He was still deep in that peaceful, ignorant slumber, his chest rising and falling in a rhythm that used to comfort me, but now just made my skin crawl. I grabbed my laptop from my work bag and went into the guest room, shutting the door softly behind me. I did not turn on the overhead light. I sat on the floor, the laptop screen casting a spectral blue glow on my face, and opened the folder I had named Receipts. It was time to process the evidence. I started with the financial thread. In the initial shock, I had seen the bets, but I assumed they were figures of speech. People say, "I bet you $10 all the time," without actually meaning it. But as I zoomed in on a conversation from 2 years ago, I realized there was nothing metaphorical about this. This was an economy. Date March 3rd, 2024. Time, 8:45 p.m. Mark, she just posted about a career pivot. Does that mean she got fired or she quit before they could fire her? Bree fired. Definitely. She has been complaining about her boss for weeks. Mom. Put me down for fired. $50. Bree, done. Venmo is open. I scrolled down 3 days later. I had called Mom crying because my position at the nonprofit had been eliminated during a restructure. I remembered her voice on the phone soothing, telling me that everything happens for a reason, that I was too good for them anyway. Date March 6th, 2024. Time 4:30 p.m. Mom. Just got off the phone with her. Terminated. Restructuring. Mark Boom. Easy money. Bree. Sending the payout now. Mom. Don't spend it all on wine. Mom. LOL. I might buy her a grocery gift card with it. Keep the charity theme going. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. They had monetized my unemployment. My mother had taken $50 from her nephew based on the fact that I had lost my source of income, and then joked about using the winnings to buy me groceries. It was sick. It was a level of dehumanization that I couldn't wrap my head around. To them, I wasn't a family member in crisis. I was a racehorse that had broken a leg. But the financial mockery was just the surface. As I went deeper into the archives, the tone shifted from mockery to management. They weren't just watching me. They were watching Xavier. I found a thread titled, The Weak Link, date November 12th, 2025. Time. 10:15 p.m. Bree Xavier says she is spiraling again. Apparently, she spent 3 hours researching nursing homes for Grandma last night. Mom. Why does she bother? She has no say in where Mother goes. Bree Xavier said she is just doing it to feel important. He is getting annoyed. He said he just wants to watch the game and she keeps asking him to look at brochures. I stopped breathing. I remembered that night. I was worried about Grandma's mobility. I had spent hours looking at assisted living ratings, trying to find a place that wouldn't strip her of her dignity if it ever came to that. I had shown Xavier a few options. I thought he was listening. I thought he was nodding because he cared. He said he's getting annoyed. I looked at the member list of the group again. I had glanced at it before, but now I audited it. Mom, Bree, Mark, Aunt Monica, Cousin David, and then, at the bottom of the list, a user with no profile picture. XC private. My heart hammered against my ribs. XC, Xavier Cole. I clicked on the user history. XC, private rarely typed. There were no long paragraphs, no jokes, but he was active. He was a reactor. I found a message from Bree mocking my haircut, a bob I had tried last year, that I admittedly regretted. Bree. She looks like a mushroom. Who let her walk out of the salon? C. Private had reacted with a laughing face emoji. I found a message from Mom complaining that I had brought a cheap bottle of wine to Easter dinner. Mom. $5 blend. I used it for cooking. X. So Private had reacted with a thumbs up. He was there. He had been there the whole time. He wasn't just a source they mined for information. He was a spectator in the Coliseum, watching the lions tear me apart and giving a silent thumbs up from the VIP box. He had sat on the couch next to me, held my hand, told me my family was difficult but well-meaning, all while carrying a digital ticket to the show of my humiliation. I felt physically ill. I wanted to go into the bedroom, shake him awake, and scream. But I forced myself to stay on the floor. Screaming was what the charity case would do. The charity case was emotional. The charity case was irrational. I needed to be a prosecutor. I moved to the next folder I had created, the Grandma Conspiracy. This was where the true danger lay. If they hated me, fine, I could cut them off. But what I read next made it clear that their target wasn't just my self-esteem. It was the estate. Date, January 5th, 2026. Time 9 a.m. Mom. We need to get the power of attorney sorted before the summer. She is slipping. Bree. Is she seemed sharp on the phone yesterday. Mom. It comes and goes. We just need a doctor to sign off on diminished capacity. I know a guy in the city who owes me a favor. If we get POA, we can move her into that facility in Cedar Hollow, the one with the nice gardens. Mark. The one that costs $8,000 a month, Mom. It does not matter. Her assets cover it. Once she is in there, we can list the house. The market is peaking. We shouldn't wait until she actually kicks the bucket. What about Isla? She is over there every other day. She will notice if we start packing boxes. Mom. Isla is a nobody. She has no legal standing. Besides, Xavier will keep her distracted. We just tell her it is for Grandma's safety. She loves playing the hero/martyr. She will probably pack the boxes for us if we sell it right. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. They were planning to declare Grandma incompetent. They were planning to sell the house, her sanctuary, the place she had lived for 50 years while she was still alive, and they were going to use a corrupt doctor to do it. Diminished capacity. Grandma wasn't diminished. She was old. Yes. She repeated stories. Yes. But she knew exactly what day it was. She knew exactly who the president was. She knew how to balance her checkbook better than I did. Then I found the mention of the notebook. Date January 10th, 2026. Time 7 p.m. Bree. Did you see that black book she carries around? She was writing in it all through lunch. Mom paranoia. She thinks she is keeping records. It is a symptom of early-stage dementia. Hoarding information. Bree. It is creepy. She looked at me, wrote something down, and then closed it, like she is the FBI. Mom. Let her scribble. It will make it easier to prove she is losing it when the time comes. Obsessive behavior is on the checklist for competency hearings. My breath caught. The notebook. Grandma had mentioned she wanted me to hear things from her mouth. She had been writing. They thought it was a symptom of madness. I realized, with a jolt of adrenaline, that it was likely the opposite. It was a ledger. Grandma knew. She suspected them, and she was documenting it, just like I was doing now. They were using her defense mechanism as evidence of her decline. I scrolled to the most recent messages, the ones regarding the legacy dinner this coming Saturday. The plan was detailed, military in its precision. Date yesterday. Time 2 p.m. Bree photographer is booked for 5. We do the group shots on the porch. Mom, make sure Isla is on the far left, or the far right, just not in the center near Mother. Bree. Why Mom? Because when we use the photo for the press release about the house sale, or the obituary later, it is easier to crop her out if she is on the edge. We want a clean shot of the direct line. You, me, Mark, the success stories. We don't need the charity case cluttering the frame. Bree smart, I will tell the photographer. Wide angle, leave space on the sides. XC, private reaction, thumbs up. That was the final blow. Xavier had liked the plan to crop his own wife out of her family history. I closed the laptop lid for a moment. Needing to breathe, the room felt too small. The betrayal was so vast, so encompassing. It felt like the walls were closing in. They weren't just mean, they were erasing me. They were rewriting the family tree in real time to prune the dead branch that was me. All while plotting to liquidate the roots, Grandma. I opened the laptop again. I reached into my bag and pulled out my external hard drive. The one I used for work backups. I plugged it in. I didn't just drag and drop the folder. I created a verified disk image. I wanted this data to be bulletproof. I wanted it to be admissible in court if it ever came to that. While the data transferred, I turned on the small wireless printer I kept in the guest room. It whirred to life, a mechanical sound in the silent house. I didn't print everything 900 messages would be a phone book. I printed the highlights, the betting slips, the power of attorney plot, the doctor connection, and every single interaction involving XC Private. I watched the paper slide out of the tray. Zip, zip, zip. The ink was still fresh. I took a yellow highlighter and drew a thick neon line through the name XC Private on the page where he reacted to the plan to crop me out. I held the paper in my hand. It was just a piece of standard A4, but it weighed a ton. This wasn't just a screenshot anymore. It was a weapon. I looked at the clock. It was 2:15 in the morning. I had the receipts. I knew who the enemy was. And I knew that the man sleeping in the next room was not my partner. He was a double agent who had sold me out for the approval of a family that didn't even like him, they just found him useful. I realized then that the legacy dinner wasn't going to be a party. It was going to be an ambush. They were going to ambush Grandma with the power of attorney papers. They were going to ambush me with the humiliation of the photo. But they had made one fatal error. They had added the witness to the conspiracy group chat. I gathered the papers and slid them into a manila envelope. I put the hard drive in my purse. I deleted the local folder from the laptop, emptied the trash, and cleared the cache, leaving no trace on the machine that I had ever seen the files. I walked back into the bedroom. Xavier was still sleeping. I looked at his face, relaxed and handsome in the moonlight. I felt a strange detachment. The love I had felt for him 6 hours ago was gone, replaced by a cold, clinical curiosity. I wondered how he would look when the mask fell off. I wondered if he would cry. I wondered if he would beg. I crawled back into bed, careful not to disturb the mattress. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the sun to rise. I wasn't the charity case anymore. I was the whistleblower, and I had a lot of noise to make. The fallout was not an explosion. It was a suffocating, coordinated pressure campaign. I had expected immediate chaos after I left the group chat, but the silence stretched into the morning hours. It was strategic. They were regrouping. They were aligning their stories. When the first contact finally came, it wasn't a phone call. It was a text message from my mother, Carol. It arrived at 8:15 in the morning, just as I was forcing myself to drink a glass of water in the kitchen. Family business should remain private. Stop making a scene. We will discuss this on Saturday. There was no apology. There was no, I am sorry you had to see that. There was certainly no, are you okay? There was only a command to de-escalate, formatted as a reprimand, to Carol. The sin was not that she had spent 7 years mocking her daughter. The sin was that I had caught her. And now I was threatening the equilibrium of her social performance. I did not reply. I deleted the thread from my main inbox, but kept the screenshot in the receipts folder. An hour later, the doorbell rang. I knew it would be Bree. Mom was too cowardly to face me without an audience, and Xavier was ostensibly at work, though I suspected he was currently in a crisis meeting in a parking lot somewhere. Bree was the enforcer. She was the one who could cry on cue and stab you while hugging you. I opened the door. Bree stood in the hallway of my apartment building. She looked immaculate. She was wearing a trench coat over a cashmere sweater, her hair blown out to perfection, her face made up with that specific no-makeup look that takes 45 minutes to achieve. Her eyes were rimmed with red, a precise, calculated amount of redness that suggested distress without ruining her mascara. "Can I come in?" she asked. Her voice was small, trembling just enough to be convincing to a stranger. But I wasn't a stranger. I was the charity case. I knew the frequency of her lies. I stepped aside. I didn't offer her coffee. I didn't take her coat. I walked into the living room and stood by the window, keeping the sofa between us like a barricade. Bree walked in, looking around my apartment with that familiar, slight curl of her lip, the subconscious appraisal of furniture she deemed beneath her. She turned to me, clasping her hands together. "Isla," she started, the tears welling up instantly. "You have to understand, it was just venting. It was a safe space for us to blow off steam. We didn't mean any of it." I looked at her. I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness. Just a cold, scientific observation of a predator trying to mimic prey. "Venting," I repeated flatly. "Yes," she said, taking a step forward. "You know how Mom is. She gets critical. I just play along to keep the peace. If I don't agree with her, she turns on me. I was protecting you, in a way, by channeling her crazy into that chat so she wouldn't say it to your face. It was a masterful pivot. She was the victim of Mom, and the chat was actually a shield for me. If I hadn't read the logs, I might have believed it. You placed a $50 bet on my divorce. Bree, I said. She froze. The tear that was tracking down her cheek stopped. Suspended by the sudden tension in her facial muscles, I continued, my voice steady. You bet Cousin Mark $50 that Xavier would leave me before Christmas. You said, and I quote, he is going to wake up and realize he married a sinking ship. Was that protecting me? Or was that just market speculation? Bree wiped her face. The trembling stopped. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by the sharp, entitled irritation that was her true default setting. You are taking it out of context, she snapped. The context was a gambling pool. I said, look, Isla, she said, dropping the act entirely. Her posture straightened. She crossed her arms. You are difficult. You have always been difficult. You mope. You play the martyr. You make everyone walk on eggshells because you are so sensitive about your situation. My situation, I asked. Your lack of success, she said bluntly. Your constant need for validation. We have to be perfect around you or you crumble. So yes, we have a place where we can be honest without hurting your feelings. Would you rather we said it to your face? Would you rather Mom told you that your job is a dead end and your apartment smells like mildew? I stared at her. She truly believed this. She had rationalized her cruelty as a necessary byproduct of my inadequacy. So the names are my fault, I said, calling me the charity case for 7 years. That is just honesty. Bree sighed. An impatient sound. It is just a nickname. Isla, God, you have no sense of humor. That is why Xavier is so exhausted. He feels like he has to manage your emotions 24/7. I felt a spike of adrenaline at his name, but I kept my face neutral. Is that what Xavier says? I asked. Bree hesitated. Her eyes flicked to the left, a micro-expression of calculation. We all see it, she said, dodging the specific attribution. But look, I didn't come here to fight. I came here to fix this before Saturday. Grandma is old. Isla, this dinner is important to her. If you go in there making a scene, waving your phone around, you are going to ruin her night. I am not the one who plotted to cut me out of the family photos. I said. Bree flinched. She hadn't realized I had scrolled back far enough to see the photography plan. Okay, she said, her voice dropping. She walked over to the sofa and sat down, uninvited. She looked up at me, her expression shifting to a transactional warmth. What do you want? Excuse me? To drop this, she said. What do you want? You want an apology? Fine. I am sorry. You want money? Is things tight this month? I can transfer you a couple thousand. Call it a retroactive birthday gift. Or do you want the photo? She leaned forward, offering the concession like a treat to a dog. I will talk to Mom, she said. We will put you right in the middle, right next to Grandma. Center frame. You can post it on Instagram. We will even tag you. How does that sound? It was breathtaking. She was trying to buy my silence with a pixel. She thought my dignity was so cheap that a spot in a JPEG would restore it. I looked at her, and I realized she was terrified, not of hurting me, but of the disruption. They had a plan for Saturday, the power of attorney. The house sale, and I was the variable that could wreck the equation. I don't want your money, Bree, I said, and I don't care about the photo. Then what she demanded, why are you holding on to this? Just to be spiteful, I walked over to the coffee table and picked up my phone. I didn't unlock it. I just held it in my hand, feeling its weight. I have a question, I said. Who is? C. Private. The room went dead silent. The air conditioner hummed. A car honked outside, but inside, the atmosphere had frozen. Bree's face went blank. It was the blankness of a computer crashing. She blinked. Once? Twice? Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. I don't know what you are talking about, she said. Her voice was too high, too fast. There is a member in the group, I said, watching her pupils dilate. See private. No profile picture. But he reacts to everything. He gave a thumbs up when you called me a mushroom. He gave a thumbs up when Mom said I was barren. Who is he? Bree. Bree stood up. She smoothed her trench coat with jerky, nervous movements. It is probably a spam bot, she said, or an old account of Dad's. I don't know, I don't track every single member. You tracked my milk spills. I said, you tracked my job interviews. You tracked my ovulation cycle. But you don't know who the active member with my husband's initials is. Bree grabbed her purse. She was retreating. The transaction had failed. And she was cutting her losses. You are crazy, she spat. This is exactly why we talk about you. You are paranoid. You invent conspiracies because your real life is so boring. She walked to the door, her heels clicking aggressively on the hardwood. She put her hand on the knob, then turned back. Her face was twisted into a mask of pure malice. Listen to me, Isla, she hissed. If you tell Grandma about this, if you show her those messages, the shock will kill her. Her heart is operating at 40%. Do you want to be the one who kills her? Do you want to explain to the family that Grandma died because you couldn't take a joke? There it was, the ultimate leverage, the hostage. Get out, I said quietly. Bree slammed the door. The sound echoed through the apartment, rattling the frame of the wedding photo hanging in the hallway. I stood there for a long time, listening to my own heartbeat. They were scared. They were scrambling, and they were using Xavier as a shield, protecting his identity even as they threw me under the bus. 20 minutes later, the lock turned. Xavier walked in. He was early. He usually didn't get home until 6. It was barely noon. He was wearing his work suit, but his tie was loosened, and he had a look of performative exhaustion on his face, the look of a good man burdened by hysterical women. He saw me standing in the living room and immediately went into damage control mode. He dropped his keys in the bowl and walked over, arms open, ready to embrace me. Hey, he said softly, I heard you had a rough morning. Bree called me. She said she came over to apologize and you kicked her out. I stepped back. His arms closed on empty air. She didn't come to apologize, I said. She came to bribe me, and then she threatened to blame me if Grandma dies. Xavier sighed, rubbing his temples. He looked so reasonable, so sane. Isla, babe, listen. I know they can be intense. I know the group chat thing looks bad. But you know how they are. They are drama queens. They feed on it. Bree was crying on the phone to me. She is worried about you. Worried about me, I asked, or worried I will talk? He stepped closer, lowering his voice to a soothing baritone. Nobody wants you to be hurt. Isla. But you have to admit, digging through 7 years of history, it is a little obsessive, isn't it? You are hurting yourself by reading that stuff. Why don't you just delete it, for your own peace of mind? Delete it, I repeated, just like that. Yes, he said, smiling encouragingly. Just wipe the slate clean. We can skip the dinner on Saturday if you want. We can go away for the weekend, just you and me. Let them have their drama. We don't need to be part of it. It was a tempting offer, a weekend away, an escape. But I heard the subtext. Get her away from Cedar Hollow. Keep her away from Grandma. Isolate the threat. I looked at him. I looked at the pocket of his suit jacket, where the outline of his phone was visible. Xavier, I said. Yeah. Unlock your phone. The smile faltered. Just a fraction. What unlock your phone? I said, extending my hand. Right now, open your messages with Bree. Open your messages with your mother-in-law. Let me see them. He laughed. It was a nervous, incredulous chuckle. Isla, come on. This is ridiculous. You are acting like I am cheating on you. Are you? I asked. Not with a woman, but with them. Are you ex-C private? He stared at me. His eyes were hard, opaque. The loving husband mask slipped, revealing the cold calculation of a man who had been betting against his wife for years. I am not doing this, he said coldly. I am not going to validate your paranoia by submitting to a search. I am your husband. Isla, if you don't trust me, we have bigger problems than a group chat. He walked past me, heading for the bedroom. I am going to change. He threw over his shoulder. I have a headache. We will talk about this when you calm down. I didn't follow him. I stood still, letting him walk away. I waited 2 minutes. Then, I walked softly to the sliding glass door that led to our small balcony. The screen door was open a crack. Xavier often went out there to smoke when he was stressed, a habit he thought I didn't know about. I stood in the shadow of the curtains. I heard the flick of a lighter. Then, the low murmur of his voice. "Yeah, I am home," he said. He was whispering. A pause. "No, she is still spun up. She asked to see my phone." A pause. "I know. Bree, I handled it. I gaslit her. I told her she was being paranoid. She backed off. My stomach turned over. I gaslit her." He used the word like a technical term, like a mechanic describing a repair. "No, she doesn't know about the POA." He continued. "She thinks it is just about the insults. She doesn't have a clue about the signing." A pause. "Yeah, I will make sure she comes on Saturday. If she doesn't come, Grandma might postpone the signing, and we can't risk that. I will play the supportive husband. I will tell her we are going there to stand our ground or whatever. I will get her in the car." A pause. "Don't worry. I have got her under control. She is soft. She will fold. She always folds." He hung up. I heard him take a long drag of the cigarette, then exhale. I backed away from the window, moving silently across the carpet until I was in the kitchen. I turned on the faucet to create white noise, my hands shaking so hard the water splashed over the rim of the sink. She is soft. She will fold. He was wrong. Soft things, under enough pressure, do not fold. They harden, or they explode. I turned off the water. I dried my hands. I had a choice. I could run out onto the balcony, scream at him, throw the phone at his head, and end the marriage right now. I could blow up the plan. But if I did that, they would win. Bree would spin it. Isla had a mental breakdown. Isla is unstable. We can't trust her with Grandma. They would keep me away from the dinner. They would get the power of attorney signed. They would sell the house, and Grandma would die thinking I was the crazy one. No, I needed them to think they had won. I needed Xavier to believe he had successfully handled me. I needed Bree to think I was cowed by the threat to Grandma's health. I needed them to feel safe enough to proceed with the execution, because you cannot catch a thief until they actually put their hand in the jar. I walked to the fridge and took out a bottle of wine. I poured 2 glasses. I walked into the bedroom. Xavier was sitting on the edge of the bed, his tie off, rubbing his neck. He looked up, wary, ready for round 2. I held out the glass of wine. "I am sorry," I said. My voice was steady. It was the best acting performance of my life. He looked at the wine, then at me. "You are right," I said, forcing my shoulders to slump in defeat. "I am overreacting. It hurts, reading that stuff. But I shouldn't take it out on you. You are the only one who has stuck by me." Xavier's face relaxed. The tension drained out of him. He smiled that smug, victorious smile of a manipulator who thinks he has successfully re-established control. He took the glass. "Thanks, babe," he said, pulling me into a side hug. "I know it is hard, but we will get through it. We will go to the dinner, show face, and leave early." Okay, I said, resting my head on his shoulder so he couldn't see my eyes. "We will go to the dinner." I thought, but we are not leaving early, and we are certainly not leaving together. The trap was set, and they had just walked right into the center of it, the Thursday before the legacy dinner. I drove to Cedar Hollow to deliver Grandma's weekly refill of warfarin and beta blockers. It was a routine I had performed hundreds of times over the last 7 years. But this time, the drive felt like a reconnaissance mission. The road, usually a blur of trees and asphalt, now looked like a path into enemy territory. I parked my sedan in the driveway, noting that the landscaping crew had already been there. The hedges were trimmed into sharp, geometric lines. The lawn was manicured to a level of perfection that suggested a magazine shoot rather than a home. When I walked in, Grandma Marlene was sitting in her usual armchair by the window, a book resting on her lap. She looked smaller than usual, her frame fragile under the heavy knit cardigan, but her eyes were clear. They tracked me as I walked into the room, scanning my face with an intensity that made me wonder if she could see the invisible war paint I had been applying since Tuesday. "Here are your meds, Grandma," I said, placing the plastic sorting box on the side table. I filled the slots for next week too, just in case. Thank you, my girl, she said. Her voice was raspy but steady. I sat on the ottoman across from her, my hands folded in my lap. I needed to test the waters. I needed to know what game we were playing without tipping my hand that I knew the rules had changed. So, I said, trying to sound casual, I wanted to ask about Saturday. Is there a dress code? Mom didn't say much. Grandma looked at me. She didn't blink. She didn't smile. What did Carol tell you? She asked. She said to keep it comfortable. I lied. Or rather, I told a half-truth. Mom hadn't told me anything yet. But I knew what was coming. Grandma snorted. A short, derisive sound that was very unlike her. Comfortable. She repeated. She looked out the window at the manicured lawn. Isla. Look at me. I looked up. Do not dress for comfort, she said. Dress as you feel you deserve. The sentence hung in the air. Heavy and ambiguous. As I feel I deserve. If I listened to the Bloodline Only chat, I deserved a sackcloth and ashes. But looking at Grandma, seeing the steel in her gaze, I understood the instruction. It was a challenge. I stood up to leave, needing to get out before I broke character and hugged her too hard. As I walked toward the door, she called out, Wait! I turned. Grandma was digging into the pocket of her cardigan. She pulled out a small object and held it out. Take this, she said. I walked back and held out my hand. She dropped a key into my palm. It was small, brass, and old-fashioned, the kind that opens a jewelry box or a diary. Not a front door. It was warm from her hand. Put it in your wallet, she commanded. Do not put it on your key ring. Do not show it to Xavier. Just keep it with you. What is it for? I asked. You will understand at the end of the night, she said. Now go. I have a nap to take before the vultures start circling. I walked out to my car, my heart thumping a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I slid the key into the zippered coin pocket of my wallet, burying it behind a stack of loyalty cards. As I was opening my car door, a voice called out from the neighboring yard. Isla. I looked over. It was Mrs. Donna Pike, Grandma's next-door neighbor for 30 years. Donna was a woman made of dried leather and skepticism, usually found gardening with a cigarette dangling from her lip. She had seen me shoveling snow. She had seen me carrying groceries. She had seen the way Mom and Bree parked their luxury SUVs in the driveway and never stayed longer than 45 minutes. Hi, Mrs. Pike, I called back. She walked over to the low stone wall separating the properties, wiping dirt from her hands. Big party Saturday. Huh? She asked. I saw the catering van do a site check this morning. Looks expensive. Yeah, I said. Just a family dinner. Donna narrowed her eyes. She leaned over the wall, lowering her voice. Listen, honey, she said. I know you are the good one. I see who takes out the trash cans on Tuesdays. I smiled tightly. Thanks, Donna. She didn't smile back. She looked at the house, then back at me. Your grandmother talks to me. You know, over the fence. She sees more than people think. She isn't naive. Isla, don't let those people treat you like the help on Saturday. You hear me? I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. I hear you. I got in the car and drove away, her words echoing in my head. She isn't naive. Halfway home, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Mom. We're Saturday. Just wear something casual. Jeans are fine. We are keeping it low-key. Don't overthink it. I stared at the screen. Then, I pulled over into a gas station parking lot and opened the encrypted folder on my phone, the archive of the group chat. I searched for the term dress code. I found a message from Bree sent to the group yesterday. Bree reminder, cocktail attire is mandatory. The photographer is charging extra for the lighting setup. So look sharp. Men in jackets, ladies in heels. We need this to look editorial. Mom agreed. I bought that silk dress from Nordstrom. Bree. Does Isla know Mom? I will tell her it is casual, if she shows up in denim while we are in silk. It visually reinforces the separation. It proves she doesn't fit in the picture. I put the phone down. They wanted a visual representation of the caste system. They wanted me to look like the poor relation. the clueless outsider who didn't get the memo, standing next to their polished perfection. It was a high school prank played by grown women with estate planning on their minds. I did not go home. I drove to the city. I went to a boutique I usually avoided because the prices made me sweat. I didn't look for something flashy. I didn't look for ruffles or prints. I looked for architecture. I found a dress in midnight navy darker than blue, sharper than black. It was structured, with a high neck and a tailored waist, falling to a precise length just below the knee. It was simple, but it was the kind of simplicity that costs money. It was armor. I bought heels, not the sensible wedges I usually wore to work, but stilettos that clicked on the floor like a weapon being cocked. When I got home, I hid the shopping bags in the trunk of my car. I couldn't let Xavier see them. He was part of the sabotage team. That evening, the atmosphere in our apartment was brittle. Xavier was performing his role of the supportive husband with an Oscar-worthy dedication. He cooked dinner. He poured wine. He asked about my day. "So, Saturday," he said, casually stirring his pasta. I was thinking maybe we go a little late. I paused, my fork hovering over my plate. "Why?" "Well, you know how tense it gets," he said, flashing a sympathetic smile. "If we get there at 5, we have to do all that mingling before dinner. It is exhausting for you. Why don't we roll in around 6? Skip the awkward small talk. Just do the meal and leave. 6 o'clock. The photographer was booked for 5. The signing of the documents was scheduled for 5:30. If we arrived at 6, the photos would be done without me. The documents would be signed without Grandma having a witness. We would walk in just in time to be served food, effectively proving that we were merely guests, not family. "That sounds nice," I said. Keeping my eyes on my food, I am dreading the small talk. "Great," he said, visibly relaxing. "We will take our time. Have a drink here first to loosen up." He thought I had folded. He thought the soft Isla had accepted the path of least resistance. Friday morning, I went to work at the Westbridge Family Services Authority. I walked into the office of my colleague, Sarah, a woman who had seen every variation of domestic disaster imaginable. "I need a favor," I said. Sarah looked up from her files. She saw my face and immediately closed her door. "Name it." I pulled a thick manila envelope out of my bag. Inside was a flash drive containing the full chat archive and a printed, notarized set of the most damning screenshots, the betting slips. The power of attorney plot. The Xavier messages. "I need you to keep this in your safe." I said, "If anything happens to me this weekend or if I call you on Saturday night and tell you to release it, I need you to be ready." Sarah took the envelope. She felt the weight of it. She didn't ask for details. In our line of work, you learned not to ask until the subpoena arrived. "Is this personal or professional?" She asked. "It is family," I said. She nodded and locked it in her bottom drawer. "It is safe." I walked back to my desk. Feeling lighter, I had the dress. I had the key. I had the evidence backed up in a secure location. And I had the husband who thought he was driving the getaway car. Unaware that he was actually driving us to the police station, I spent the rest of the day reviewing the script. I memorized the timestamps. I memorized the insults. I prepared my responses not as a victim, but as a witness taking the stand. When I went home on Friday night, Xavier was in high spirits. He was texting on the couch, probably updating Bree that the Isla problem was contained, that we would be arriving late, that I was docile and clueless. I sat next to him. I put my head on his shoulder. "I am actually looking forward to tomorrow," I said softly. "Yeah," he asked, kissing the top of my head. "That is the spirit. It will be over before you know it." He had no idea. It wasn't going to be over. It was finally, after 7 years of silence, about to begin. I drove. That was how we arrived on time. When 4:15 rolled around and Xavier was still looking for his cufflinks, a stalling tactic so transparent a child could see through it, I simply walked out to the driveway, started the engine, and honked the horn once. He had to choose between his cover story of the supportive husband or his secret mission to delay us. The supportive husband won. He jogged out, irritated but smiling, and we pulled into Cedar Hollow exactly at 4:55. The house did not look like the place where I had spent 7 years scraping ice off the walkway. It had been transformed into a stage set. The driveway was lined with vintage lanterns. The sprawling backyard, usually a patchwork of garden hoses and bird feeders, was draped in string lights that mimicked a starry sky. There were white circular tables set up on the lawn, complete with heavy linen tablecloths and floral centerpieces that probably cost more than my first car. A catering van was parked discreetly on the side, and a team of servers in black vests was circulating with silver trays. It was beautiful, it was expensive, and it felt completely fraudulent. We walked up the path. I could feel Xavier's hand on the small of my back, a gesture that used to feel protective, but now felt like he was steering a prisoner. When we stepped onto the porch, the air shifted. My mother, Carol, was holding court near the entrance. She was wearing the silk dress from Nordstrom Emerald Green, floor length, shimmering under the lights. Beside her, Bree was in a silver cocktail dress that caught every photon in the vicinity. They looked like royalty. They turned when they saw us. I saw the flicker of disappointment in Carol's eyes before the social mask slammed into place. She had expected me in jeans. She had expected the visual confirmation of my inferiority, the casual, clueless daughter stumbling into a formal event. Instead, I was wearing the midnight navy dress. It was structural, severe, and perfectly tailored. My hair was pulled back in a sharp, low bun. My heels clicked with authority on the timber deck. I didn't look like the charity case. I looked like an executive who had come to audit the books. "Isla," Mom said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "You made it, and you dressed up. I thought we said casual." "I must have misread the room," I said, my voice light. "But it looks like I fit right in." Bree looked me up and down, her eyes narrowing as she assessed the quality of the fabric. "Well," she said, "at least you won't stand out." It was the first insult of the night. Wrapped in a compliment, "You won't stand out." We moved into the crowd. There were about 30 people, neighbors, old friends of Grandma, a few distant cousins, and the inevitable business associates my mother liked to keep around. It was a mix of a reunion and a networking event. I walked through the throng, and the sensation of being an outsider was physical. People smiled, but they looked through me. They greeted Xavier with enthusiasm. "Oh, the husband. Good to see you, Xavier." But for me, it was a polite nod. I was the background noise. I was the static. I made my way toward the bar. But before I could order, I saw the photographer. He was a professional, carrying 2 cameras on a harness, directing people toward the rose garden where the light was golden hour perfect. "Family photo," Carol called out, clapping her hands. "Bloodline and spouses, please, before we lose the sun." We gathered near the trellis. This was the moment they had planned in the chat. Wide angle, leave space on the sides. Grandma Marlene was brought out in her wheelchair. Though I knew she could walk fine for short distances, they were staging her frailty. She looked regal in a deep purple suit, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, but her face was unreadable. Carol took her position immediately behind Grandma's right shoulder. Bree took the left. They formed a phalanx of ownership. "Xavier, you stand next to Bree," Carol directed. "Mark, over here." I stepped toward the center, aiming for the spot next to Grandma's chair. "Isla, honey," Carol said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Why don't you stand on the end? Next to Mark. The composition is a bit crowded in the middle." I stopped. I looked at the spot she was pointing to. It was the far edge of the frame, the cropping zone. "I think I will stand here," I said, not moving. Next to my husband, Bree let out a small, tight laugh. "Isla, don't be difficult. The lighting is better on the edge. You are casting a shadow on Grandma." "I am fine with shadows," I said. The photographer looked uncomfortable. If the lady in the blue could just—" "Isla," Xavier whispered, leaning in. "Just move to the side. Don't make a scene. It is just a picture." I looked at him. It is just a picture. It was the same line he had used about the group chat. It is just venting. I didn't move. I didn't argue. I just stayed planted in the soil, forcing them to arrange themselves around me. If they wanted to crop me out, they would have to crop Xavier out too. Carol's jaw tightened, but she didn't want to break the tableau in front of the neighbors. Fine, everyone smile. The shutter clicked. Once, twice, 10 times. I stared straight into the lens, not smiling, just witnessing. After the photos, we were ushered to the tables for dinner. I walked over to the main table where Grandma was being seated. I looked for my name card. It wasn't there. Bree was seated to Grandma's right. Carol was across from her. Xavier was next to Bree. I scanned the other tables. Finally, I found it. Isla Simmons. My seat was at a small, round table near the service entrance to the kitchen. It was the table where they had put the photographer's assistant and 2 teenagers I didn't recognize. "Oh," Carol said, coming up behind me. "We put you there so you could be close to the kitchen, in case the caterers need help with the flow. You are so good at managing the details." "Of course," I said. "Strategically placed." I sat down. From my vantage point, I could see the main table perfectly. I could see them pouring wine for Grandma. I could see Xavier laughing at something Bree whispered. He looked relaxed. He looked like he belonged there. A server came by with a tray of champagne flutes. He offered one to the photographer's assistant. He offered one to the teenagers. Then, he looked at me, checked his tray, and said, "Apologies. I will be right back with more." He walked away. He did not come back. 10 minutes later, another server came with hors d'oeuvres. He circled the table, served everyone else, and then turned his back to me to head to the next group. It was fascinating. It was a ballet of exclusion. They had instructed the catering staff. The woman in navy doesn't need service. It was petty, childish, and incredibly effective at making someone feel invisible. I didn't wave him down. I didn't complain. I reached into my purse, took out a bottle of water I had brought myself, and took a sip. I was hydration independent. As the salad course was served, mine arrived 3 minutes after everyone else's. Without dressing, I saw Xavier stand up. He touched Bree's shoulder, whispered something, and slipped away from the table. He didn't head for the bathroom. He headed toward the back porch, the shadowed area where the smokers congregated. I watched him. A moment later, Aunt Monica, Carol's sister, a woman who had ignored my existence since I was 12, stood up and followed him. I waited 30 seconds, then I stood up. "Bathroom?" I told the teenager next to me, who was engrossed in his phone. I didn't go to the bathroom. I circled the perimeter of the lawn, staying in the shadows of the hedges. Until I had a view of the back porch, Xavier and Monica were standing near the trellis. They weren't smoking. Xavier was reaching into the inside pocket of his suit jacket. He pulled out a folded sheaf of papers, thin, legal-sized documents. He handed them to Monica. She took them quickly, sliding them into her clutch. She said something to him, tapping his chest with a manicured finger. He nodded, looking serious. Then he checked his watch and pointed back toward the party. I snapped a mental picture. Time: 7:15 p.m. Exchange of documents between Xavier Cole and Monica Carver. I slipped back to my seat, just as the main course was being cleared. Then came the speeches. This was the centerpiece of the evening. The microphone was set up. The spotlight was turned on. Bree stood up. She held a glass of champagne, the bubbles catching the light. She looked beautiful. I had to admit, she looked like the granddaughter on the brochure of a luxury nursing home. "Hi, everyone," she began, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. "For those who don't know me, I am Bree, Marlene's granddaughter." Applause. "We are here tonight to celebrate the legacy of this amazing woman," Bree continued, looking down at Grandma with adoring eyes. "Growing up, this house was my sanctuary, and in the last few years, as Grandma's health has faced challenges, it has been my greatest honor to be her rock." I sat very still. "I remember the nights," Bree said, wiping a tear. "The scary nights, when the doctors weren't sure. I remember sitting by her bedside, holding her hand, telling her she wasn't alone. We have been through so much. Grandma, just you and me against the world. The audacity was breathtaking. I remembered the nights, too. I remembered the night Grandma had the stroke scare. I called Bree 5 times. She was at a vineyard bachelorette party. She texted back, "Can't talk. Send updates." I was the one holding the hand. I was the one sleeping in the plastic chair. And that is why, Bree concluded, raising her glass, I am so proud to carry this family's name into the future. To protect what you built, Grandma. To make sure your legacy is handled with the love it deserves. To Marlene, the crowd toasted. To Marlene, I whispered, lifting my water bottle. Bree sat down, beaming. Carol hugged her. Xavier patted her on the back. Then, a voice cut through the applause. It was Mrs. Abernathy, an 80-year-old woman with a cane and zero filter, sitting 2 tables away from me. She had been watching the room with hawk eyes all night. "Excuse me," she said loudly. She pointed a trembling finger at me. "Isn't that Carol's other girl, the older one?" The room went quiet. The chatter died down. Carol froze. She turned her head slowly. "Yes, that is Isla," Carol said, her voice tight. "Well?" Mrs. Abernathy asked, her voice carrying clearly over the string quartet. "Why is she sitting by the kitchen door? Why isn't she sitting with her grandmother?" The silence that followed was heavy. It was the kind of silence that has weight and mass. Bree's smile faltered. Xavier looked down at his plate. Carol opened her mouth, but no sound came out. They hadn't planned for a heckler. I looked at Mrs. Abernathy. I smiled. It was a genuine smile. "It is okay, Mrs. Abernathy," I said, my voice clear and projecting without a microphone. "I have a great view from here. I can see everything perfectly." I put emphasis on the word everything. Grandma Marlene turned in her wheelchair. She ignored Carol. She ignored Bree. She looked across the sea of white linen and flowers, straight at me. She lifted her hand and beckoned. "Isla," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it commanded the air. "Come here." I stood up. I walked across the lawn. The click of my heels was the only sound. I walked past the neighbors, past the cousins who had bet on my divorce, past my husband who was staring at me with a mix of fear and confusion. I stopped next to Grandma. She reached out and took my hand. Her grip was iron. "Pull up a chair," she said. "There is no chair." "Mother," Carol hissed. "The table is full." "Then move," Grandma said. She didn't look at Carol. She looked at Xavier. "Xavier, get up. Give your wife your seat." Xavier scrambled up as if the chair was on fire. "Of course, Grandma. Sorry. Here, Isla." I sat down. I was now at the head table. I was sitting between Bree and Grandma. Bree was radiating heat. If she could have incinerated me with her mind, I would have been ash. Grandma leaned in close to me. She pulled me down so my ear was near her lips. The room was watching. They thought she was giving me a greeting. "Stay until the end," she whispered. Her breath smelled of peppermint tea. "Do not let them make you leave. And remember, Isla." She squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. "Tonight, you are not my caretaker. You are my executioner. Don't protect anyone for me, not even your mother." She pulled back and looked at me. There was a fierce, terrifying joy in her eyes. "Do you have the key?" she asked softly. I nodded. "In my pocket." "Good," she said. She turned back to the table, picked up her spoon, and tapped her glass. Clink, clink, clink. "Now," Grandma announced to the frozen table, "I believe it is time for dessert, and I believe I have a few things to say myself." The color drained from Carol's face. I sat back, smoothing the skirt of my navy dress. I looked at Xavier, who was standing awkwardly behind Bree, chairless and exposed. The stage was set, the players were in position, and the director had just yelled action. The silence that descended upon the lawn was different from the silence that had followed Mrs. Abernathy's outburst. That first silence had been shock. This silence was anticipation. It was the heavy, pressurized quiet of a courtroom right before the foreman reads the verdict. The servers had just placed small porcelain plates of caramel custard in front of the guests. The sugar crusts were perfectly caramelized, glistening under the string lights, but no one picked up a spoon. Grandma Marlene sat in her wheelchair at the head of the table. She didn't look frail anymore. The confused old woman act she had apparently been playing for months had evaporated, revealing the matriarch who had single-handedly managed a construction business after my grandfather died. She looked sharp. She looked dangerous. She picked up her water glass, not champagne, and tapped it with her spoon again. Clink, clink. "Do not rush to the sweets," she said, her voice projecting effortlessly to the back tables where the cousins were sitting. "We have plenty of time, and I have a few words." Carol, sitting across from me, stiffened. Her smile was plastered on, but her eyes were darting around the perimeter, likely looking for a way to cut the microphone or signal the band to play loud music. "Bree just gave a lovely speech," Grandma said, turning slightly to look at my sister. Bree preened, straightening her posture, thinking she was back in the safety zone. "She spoke about legacy. She spoke about memory." Grandma paused. She looked out at the guests, the neighbors, the doctor who had treated her pneumonia, the lawyer, the friends. "But memory is a tricky thing," Grandma continued, "especially in this family. We have a habit of remembering things that make us look good, and forgetting the things that are inconvenient." She reached down into the side pocket of her wheelchair. I watched her hand. It was trembling slightly, not from age, but from the adrenaline of a woman who had been holding her tongue for too long. She pulled out a book. It was a black moleskin notebook. The cover was worn, the corners bent, the elastic strap stretched out from years of use. It was the same book Bree had mocked in the group chat, the book of paranoia, the symptom of dementia. Carol gasped. It was a soft sound, like a tire losing air. But I heard it. She recognized the book. She knew what was inside, or at least, she feared what was inside. "My daughter and granddaughter believe I carry this because I am losing my mind," Grandma said, placing the book on the pristine white tablecloth. It looked stark and violent against the lace. "They think I write things down because I cannot remember who the president is, or what day of the week it is." She opened the book. The pages were dense with handwriting blue ink, neat cursive, organized by date. "But I do not write to remember the world," Grandma said. "I write to remember the truth, because when you are old, and you have money, people tend to rewrite your history for you. They tell you that they were there when they were not. They tell you that they love you when they only love your signature." She put on her reading glasses. The movement was deliberate, theatrical. "I call this my ledger of attendance," she said. She flipped to a page near the middle. "October 14th, 2023, she read. Her voice was flat, reporting facts. 3 a.m, I remembered that date. "I fell in the hallway," Grandma read. "I slipped on the rug. I broke my wrist and I could not get up. I pressed my life alert button. The service called my primary contact, Carol." Grandma looked up over her glasses at her daughter. "The log shows they called you 3 times. Carol, you did not answer. Your phone was on Do Not Disturb. You told me the next day that you had poor reception because you were at the lake house." Carol cleared her throat, her face flushing a deep, blotchy red. "Mother, that was the reception was bad. I felt terrible." Grandma looked back at the book. "I wrote a note here. Check Carol's Facebook. Ah, here it is. At 3:15 that morning. You were active. You liked a post by your Pilates instructor." A ripple went through the crowd. Someone at the back table coughed to cover a laugh. "I lay on the floor for 45 minutes, Grandma continued. "Then the service called Isla." She didn't look at me. She kept her eyes on the page. Isla arrived in 12 minutes. She was wearing pajamas and a coat. She rode with me in the ambulance. She stayed in the emergency room for 6 hours. She missed a day of work. Grandma turned the page. The sound of the paper turning was the loudest noise in the mesmerizing night. December 25th, 2024, Christmas Day. Bree shifted in her seat. Grandma, really, is this necessary? We are having a party. Quiet, Grandma snapped. It wasn't a request. It was a command. Christmas Day, she repeated. The family came for dinner. It was lovely. We took photos. Bree posted one with the caption, "My favorite person in the world." It got 400 likes. Grandma ran her finger down the page. But the log says Bree arrived at 2 p.m. Bree left at 3:30 p.m. She spent 45 minutes on her phone in the guest room editing the photo. She spoke to me for exactly 10 minutes. She asked if I had considered selling the lake property. Bree's mouth opened, then closed. She looked at Xavier, silently pleading for backup. But Xavier was staring at his shoes, trying to make himself invisible. Isla arrived at 10 in the morning, Grandma read. She cooked the turkey. She did the dishes. She sat with me until 9 o'clock at night, and we watched old movies. She did not take a photo. Grandma closed the book for a moment, keeping her finger on the page. This book is full of these entries, she said to the silent audience. 7 years of them, every doctor's appointment, every grocery run, every time the snow needed shoveling, every time the basement flooded. She looked at the neighbors. You all see the photos on social media. You see the legacy. But this book tells me who my family actually is when the shutter is closed. I sat there, my hands trembling in my lap. I had never told her. I had never complained. I thought she didn't notice. I thought she was asleep when I was cleaning the kitchen, or that she was too medicated to notice who was driving the car. She had noticed everything. She had been keeping score. But the most painful entries, Grandma said, her voice softening, losing its edge and gaining a heavy sorrow, are not about what you did to me. They are about what you did to her. She gestured to me without looking. August 3rd, 2025. She read. I froze. I knew this date. It was the darkest day of my life. It was the day I had the miscarriage. Isla called me, Grandma read. She was crying. She said she lost the baby. She was at the hospital alone because Xavier was on a business trip. She paused to let the words sink in. Business trip. The sarcasm in her voice suggested she knew exactly what kind of business Xavier was doing, or rather, not doing. I called Carol, Grandma read. I told her, Isla needs her mother. She has lost the baby. I asked her to go to the hospital. Carol looked down at her lap, picking at a loose thread on her napkin. She looked small. Carol said, I can't deal with her drama right now. Mother, I have a gala tonight. Tell her I will send flowers. A collective gasp went through the lawn. Mrs. Pike, standing near the punch bowl, shook her head audibly. Shameful, she muttered. And Bree? Grandma continued, flipping the page. I called Bree. I thought, surely a sister would go, Bree said. It is probably for the best. She wasn't ready anyway. Bree stood up. Her chair scraped violently against the deck. Okay, stop, she cried out. Her voice was shrill, cracking under the pressure. This is insane. You are reading things out of context. You are twisting everything to make us look like monsters. We love Isla. We were just processing it in our own way. Processing, Grandma repeated. She opened the book again. Is that what you were doing at the spa? Bree froze. I have the receipt, Grandma said calmly. You weren't processing. You were getting a seaweed wrap. You posted a story, Self-Care Saturday, while your sister was bleeding in a hospital room. Grandma, please, Bree begged. Tears streaming down her face, real tears this time. Tears of humiliation. People are watching. Why are you doing this? Because I am tired of the fiction. Bree, Grandma said, I am 90 years old. I do not have time for polite lies anymore. She looked at Carol. You call Isla the charity case, Grandma said. The nickname hung in the air. I saw the neighbors exchange looks. The charity case. It was cruel. It was ugly. I heard you, Grandma said. I have good hearing. I heard you whisper it in the kitchen last Easter. I heard you say it on the phone when you thought I was napping. You think she is a burden. You think she is weak because she feels things, because she serves others." Grandma slammed the book shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "Well, let me tell you what I have written in the final entry of this book," she said. She placed her hand on the black leather cover. "The charity case is the only person at this table who has ever given me anything without asking for a receipt." She turned to me. Her eyes were wet. "Isla," she said, "do you have the key?" I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. I reached into my clutch and pulled out the small brass key. I held it up. It glinted in the lantern light. "Good," Grandma said. "You might need to use that tonight. There is a drawer in my desk upstairs. The locked one. The one Carol has been trying to find the key to for 3 years." Carol's head snapped up. She knew the drawer. "But before you open that drawer," Grandma said, "there is one more thing we need to do." She turned her gaze away from the women. She turned it to the man standing behind Bree's empty chair. Xavier was sweating. He was pale. He looked like a man who was looking for an exit but knew the doors were barred. "My book has entries about you, too, Xavier," Grandma said softly. She picked up the book again, but she didn't open it. She just held it. "I have entries about the times you came to visit me alone," she said. "The times Isla didn't know about." Xavier took a step back. "Grandma, I was just checking on you. Were you," she asked, "or were you checking on the assets?" She looked at the guests. "I want to introduce you all to a special guest," she announced. "Someone who isn't family, but who knows more about this family's business than anyone else." She pointed to the back of the garden, where a woman in a gray suit had been standing quietly in the shadows near the catering van. "Evelyn," Grandma called out, "please come forward." Evelyn Price walked into the light. She was carrying a briefcase. I knew who she was. She wasn't just a friend. She was a notary, and she was the senior partner at the law firm that handled the town's biggest estates. Grandma looked back at Xavier. "Before Evelyn opens her briefcase," Grandma said, her voice dropping to a whisper that was louder than a scream, "I want one person to stand up and tell the truth. Just one. If you can do that, maybe I will leave the book closed." She looked at Carol. Carol looked away. She looked at Bree. Bree was sobbing into her napkin. She looked at Xavier. "Xavier," Grandma said, "why don't you tell your wife what you and Monica were discussing on the back porch 20 minutes ago?" The air left the room. I looked at Xavier. He looked at me. And for the first time in 7 years, I saw him clearly. There was no love in his eyes. There was only calculation, and the terrifying realization that his math had been wrong. "Stand up, Xavier," Grandma commanded, and slowly, agonizingly. My husband stood up. The air on the lawn had changed. It was no longer the humid, summer evening air of Cedar Hollow. It was vacuum-sealed, thin and sharp, the kind of atmosphere that precedes a tornado. The string lights, previously festive, now felt like interrogation lamps. Grandma Marlene did not look at the sobbing Bree or the frozen Carol. Her eyes were fixed on the back of the garden, where the woman in the gray suit was waiting. "Evelyn," Grandma said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of a gavel striking wood. "Please." Evelyn Price stepped onto the deck. I knew Evelyn. To most people in Cedar Hollow, she was just the quiet woman who ran the local historical society and played bridge on Tuesdays. But I knew her former life, before she retired to grow hydrangeas. Evelyn had been the fiercest probate paralegal and notary in the county. She was a woman who could spot a forged signature from across a room. She walked to the table, her heels making a dull, authoritative thud against the timber. She was holding a leather briefcase. She did not smile at Carol. She did not acknowledge Bree. She placed the briefcase on the table next to the black notebook. "Good evening," Evelyn said. Her tone was purely administrative, which made it terrifying. "I am here tonight in my official capacity as a notary public and as the independent witness to the estate planning of Marlene Hart." She clicked the latches of the briefcase. Snap, snap. "I can confirm," Evelyn continued, looking at the guests. That the documents Marlene is about to discuss were drafted, reviewed, and notarized in my presence over the last 6 months. They are filed, they are sealed. And they supersede any previous arrangements, verbal or written. She looked directly at Aunt Monica, who was clutching her purse so tightly her knuckles were white. They also supersede, Evelyn added, her voice dropping a degree, any documents that might have been brought onto this property tonight by unauthorized parties. I heard a sharp intake of breath from Monica. The stack of papers Xavier had handed her, the ones I had seen on the porch, suddenly felt radioactive. Grandma nodded to Evelyn, then turned her head slowly. The mechanism of her neck seemed to ratchet, locking onto her target. "Xavier," she said. My husband flinched. It was a small movement, a twitch of the shoulder, but I felt it vibrate through the floorboards. "Grandma," Xavier said. He tried to summon his usual charm, that boyish, non-threatening affability that had fooled me for 5 years. He forced a smile, but it looked like a rictus of pain. "I think things are getting a little heated, don't you? Maybe we should—" "Stand up," Grandma said. She didn't shout. She didn't have to. The command was absolute. Xavier pushed his chair back. It scraped against the wood, a harsh, screeching sound that made Mrs. Abernathy wince. He stood up. He looked tall, handsome in his suit, the perfect picture of the devoted grandson-in-law. But I looked at his hands. They were hanging by his sides, and his fingers were drumming a frantic, silent rhythm against his thigh. I looked at his face. The tan he had worked so hard on seemed to have drained away, leaving his skin a sickly, waxen yellow. For the first time since I met him, I saw fear, true, primal fear. He wasn't afraid of losing money. He was afraid of being seen. "You have always been such a helpful boy, Xavier," Grandma said. She opened the black book again. The pages whispered. "Always asking if I need anything," she continued. "Always checking if the house is too big for me. If the stairs are too steep. I worry about you," Xavier said. His voice cracked. He cleared his throat. "We all do. Isla worries too." "Do not say her name," Grandma said. The sharpness in her voice made him recoil. She ran her finger down a page. "September 12th, 2025, she read. 4 months ago, a Tuesday afternoon, Isla was at work. I remembered that day. Xavier had taken the day off. He told me he was going golfing with a client. Xavier came to visit, Grandma read. He brought me a box of chocolates. He sat in the kitchen. He did not ask about my heart. He asked about the deed to the lake house. Xavier shifted his weight. Grandma, that was just conversation. I was making small talk. He asked, Grandma continued, ignoring him, if I had considered a power of attorney. He said, Marlene, you know Isla gets overwhelmed. She is not good with numbers. If something happens to you, she will crumble under the administration. You need someone stronger to handle the assets. The world stopped spinning. I stared at the back of my husband's jacket. He hadn't just bet against me. He hadn't just mocked me. He had actively campaigned against me. He had gone to the woman I loved most in the world and tried to convince her that I was incompetent. He had used my emotional nature, the very empathy that made me a good caretaker, as a weapon to disqualify me from protecting her. He told me, Grandma read, that he knew a lawyer who could draft a limited power of attorney just for the finances, to take the burden off Isla. He was trying to help, Bree shouted. She couldn't help herself. The silence was too heavy for her to bear. He loves Isla. He didn't want her to be stressed. He was doing it for her. Grandma didn't even look at Bree. She just raised her hand, palm out, silencing her. I told him I would think about it, Grandma said, and I did. I thought about it a lot. She looked at Xavier. And then, 3 weeks later, I noticed something else. She flipped a few pages forward. I noticed that things I told Xavier in confidence, private things about my health, about the will, were appearing in the mouths of my daughter and granddaughter. Grandma looked at the guests. I told Xavier I was thinking about changing my charity bequests. 2 days later, Carol calls me screaming that I am giving away the inheritance. I told Xavier I was feeling tired. The next day, Bree is posting about how some people should be in assisted living for their own safety. She closed the book. I realized, Grandma said, that I did not have a grandson-in-law. I had a spy. The word hung there, spy. I looked at the manila envelope I had seen Xavier hand to Aunt Monica earlier. The pieces slammed together in my mind with the force of a car crash. The power of attorney discussion in the group chat. The plan to get the papers signed before dinner. The supportive husband act to get me to the party late, so I wouldn't be there to witness the signing. The documents handed off to Monica when the timing failed. It wasn't just a general plan, it was a specific legal coup. Xavier was the architect. He wasn't the passive observer giving a thumbs up. He was the one feeding them the intel they needed to time their attack. He was the XC private account, but he was also the field agent. Xavier started. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. Isla, you know me. You know I wouldn't. I looked at him. I remembered the balcony. I remembered the smoke. I gaslit her. She is soft. She will fold. I didn't say a word. I just looked at him with the same clinical detachment I used when assessing a high-risk case file. Grandma reached under the table again. She pulled out a second envelope. This one was not black. It was thick, white, and sealed with red wax. She placed it on the table in front of her. This is not the will, Grandma said. We will get to that in a moment. She tapped the envelope with her index finger. This, she said, is a file that Evelyn and I put together. It contains a transcript of a recording. Xavier froze. His mouth hung open slightly. A recording, he whispered. My house has a security system. Xavier, Grandma said pleasantly. Isla installed it 3 years ago. She was worried about burglars. She put cameras in the hallway, in the kitchen, on the back porch. She smiled. It was a terrifying smile. She set it up so the audio only records when triggered by motion. But you move around a lot when you are nervous, don't you? Grandma picked up the envelope and held it out, but she didn't give it to him. I have a recording of a conversation you had with Carol in my kitchen while I was in the bathroom, Grandma said, and I have a recording of a phone call you took on my back porch about 20 minutes ago. Something about handling your wife. The blood drained from Xavier's face so completely, he looked like a corpse standing upright. He knew. He knew exactly what he had said on that balcony. She is soft. She will fold. So, Grandma said, her voice hard as diamond, we are at a crossroads. Xavier. She placed the envelope back on the table, squarely between them. I am about to read my last will and testament, but before I do, I am giving you a choice, a courtesy I am not extending to anyone else. She leaned forward. You can stand there and lie to Isla again. You can tell her you were protecting her. You can tell her you are the victim. She paused. Or, you can admit right now, in front of God and these neighbors, exactly what those papers in Monica's purse are. You can admit who you have been working for, and you can admit why you married my granddaughter. The silence in the room was absolute. The crickets had stopped. The wind had died. There was only the sound of Xavier's breathing, shallow and ragged. I watched him. I watched the man I had shared a bed with for 5 years. I watched him weigh the options. I watched him calculate the odds. He looked at the envelope. He looked at Evelyn, who was staring at him with the impassive judgment of the law. He looked at Monica, who was looking at the ground, and then he looked at me. He opened his mouth. Isla, he said. His voice was a whisper. Don't talk to her, Grandma snapped. Talk to the room. Xavier closed his eyes. He swayed slightly. He began. He stopped. He looked at the envelope again. He knew what was in there. He knew there was no spin, no charm, no lie that could survive the playback of his own voice betraying me. The papers, Xavier said, his voice trembling so hard the words barely formed. The papers are a durable power of attorney. Carol let out a low moan and put her head in her hands. Go on, Grandma said. They transfer control. Xavier swallowed. They transfer control of the estate and the medical decisions to Carol Simmons. And what was your role? Grandma asked. Xavier looked at the ground. He couldn't look at me. I was supposed to get you to sign them, tonight, before the dinner started. And Isla, Grandma asked. Where does Isla fit into this plan? Xavier let out a sob. It was a pathetic, broken sound. Isla wasn't supposed to know, he whispered. We were going to put you in the home next month, and tell Isla it was your decision. The sound that came out of the guests was not a gasp. It was a low, angry rumble. It was the sound of a community realizing there was a predator in their midst. Grandma nodded. She looked satisfied, but not happy. There is no happiness in confirming that your family is a nest of vipers. Thank you, Xavier, she said, for finally being honest. She picked up the white envelope, the one with the recording, and slid it across the table toward me. Isla, she said, this is for you. You can listen to it later, or you can burn it. It is your property now. Then she turned to Evelyn. Evelyn, Grandma said, her voice ringing out in the cool night air. Open the briefcase. It is time to read the will. As Evelyn undid the final latch, I looked at Xavier. He had collapsed back into his chair, his head in his hands, a ruined man, but I didn't feel pity. I felt the weight of the brass key in my pocket, and I realized that for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for permission to exist. I was waiting for the ink to dry. The silence that occupied the garden was absolute. It was not the silence of peace. It was the vacuum of a held breath. The kind that happens when a guillotine blade is hoisted to its highest point and hangs there, suspended against the gravity of the inevitable. Evelyn Price opened the leather folder. The sound of the paper sliding against the leather was the only noise in Cedar Hollow. She handed the document to Grandma Marlene. Grandma put on her reading glasses. She did not look at Carol, who was weeping silently into her hands. She did not look at Bree, who was staring at the tablecloth as if hoping it would swallow her whole. She did not look at Xavier, who was slumped in his chair, a man whose entire future had just evaporated in the span of 10 minutes. Grandma looked at the paper. I, Marlene Elizabeth Hart, being of sound mind and body, she read, her voice cutting through the night air like a diamond cutter, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament, revoking all prior wills and codicils. She paused. Article 1, the property. Carol lifted her head. This was it. The asset they had been salivating over. The real estate that was supposed to fund Bree's lifestyle and Xavier's investments. I hereby bequeath my primary residence at 412 Maple Avenue, Cedar Hollow, including all contents, furniture, and personal effects, to my granddaughter, Isla Simmons. A collective gasp ripped through the crowd. It wasn't just a ripple, it was a shockwave. Carol stood up, her chair tipping backward. Mother, you can't. That house has been in the trust for sit down. Carol Grandma barked. She did not look up from the paper. Carol sat. She had no choice. Grandma continued reading. This bequest includes a permanent right of residency. Furthermore, the property is to be placed into a protective trust managed by Evelyn Price. This trust is designed specifically to prevent the sale, liquidation, or leveraging of the property by any party other than Isla Simmons. It is protected from marital assets. It is protected from family pressure. She looked over her glasses at Xavier. That means, Xavier, that even if you stay married to her, you cannot touch a single brick of this house. You cannot borrow against it. You cannot sell it. It is hers, entirely. Xavier flinched as if she had slapped him. Article 2. Grandma read, the financial assets. This was the money, the stocks, the bonds, the life insurance. The remainder of my estate is to be divided, she said, but not equally. She turned the page. I have created a specific clause regarding the distribution of funds to my daughter, Carol Simmons, and my granddaughter, Bree Walsh. I call this the Truth and Reconciliation Clause. She looked at the guests. To receive their inheritance, which is a fixed sum and not a percentage, They must sign a sworn affidavit admitting to their participation in a digital group known as Bloodline Only. They must acknowledge, in writing, the specific disparaging remarks made against their family member, Isla Simmons, over the course of 7 years. If they refuse to sign, or if they attempt to contest this will, their portion of the estate will be donated immediately to the Cedar Hollow Women's Shelter. Bree let out a choked sob. It was the sound of someone realizing that their greed was now being held hostage by their pride. They could have the money, but only if they publicly destroyed their own reputation. Grandma lowered the paper. She picked up a separate document, a single sheet of heavy cream stationery. "This is my letter of instruction," she said. "It is not a legal document, but it is a moral one." She looked directly at Carol. "You called her the charity case." The nickname hung in the air. "Ugly and naked. You called her that because she didn't have your money." Grandma said, "You called her that because she worked for what she had. You mocked her for needing help, while you lived off the interest of a fortune you did not earn." She turned to Bree. "And you? You laughed. You placed bets. You turned her life into a spectator sport." Grandma leaned forward. "Tell me, Bree, do you find it funny now? Is it amusing that the charity case now owns the roof over your head? Because let us be clear when you come to visit me. You will be a guest in Isla's home, and if she wants to lock the door, she can—" Bree shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "No, Grandma, please, I am asking you a question." Grandma's voice rose, thunderous and terrifying. "Is it funny?" "No," Bree screamed. "No, it is not funny." Grandma nodded. "Good. I am glad we agree." She turned her attention to the final person at the table. She picked up the white envelope she had placed in front of Xavier earlier. She didn't open it. She just slid it across the white linen until it hit his hand. "Article 3, Grandma said softly. "The conspirators." Xavier looked at the envelope. He looked like he wanted to vomit. "Inside that envelope, Xavier, is a copy of a legal filing that Evelyn prepared this morning." Grandma said, "It is a formal complaint regarding the unauthorized sharing of private medical information and the attempt to coerce an elder into signing legal documents under duress." Xavier's hands shook. "Grandma, please, I can explain. It was a misunderstanding. It is not a criminal charge." "Xavier." Evelyn Price cut in. Her voice was dry and clinical. "Not yet, but it is enough to trigger an investigation by the Bar Association if we choose to file it. And it is certainly enough to ensure that if you ever try to claim a spousal share of this estate, we will release the full transcript of your conversations with Monica Carver." Xavier went silent. The threat was precise. It wasn't about jail. It was about ruin. It was about his reputation in the town, his career, his standing. Grandma closed the folder. "The reading is concluded," she announced. The guests sat in stunned silence. No one moved. No one reached for their wine. The air was thick with the wreckage of a family that had been dismantled in 15 minutes. Grandma turned to me. "Isla," she said softly. "The key." I stood up. My legs felt heavy, but steady. I reached into my clutch and pulled out the small brass key. "Go to the study," Grandma said. "The top drawer, the one that is always locked." I walked away from the table. The sound of my heels on the deck was the only rhythm in the world. I walked through the sliding glass doors, into the cool, air-conditioned quiet of the living room, and down the hall to Grandma's study. I knew this room. It smelled of old paper and peppermint. I walked to the heavy oak desk. I inserted the key into the lock of the top drawer. It turned with a satisfying, heavy thunk. I pulled the drawer open. Inside, there was no money. There were no jewels. There was a single manila folder and a handwritten letter on blue stationery. I opened the folder first. It was the printout of the entire Bloodline Only chat log, the one I had given to my friend at the office. Grandma had it. She had it the whole time. I picked up the blue letter. "My dearest Isla, if you are reading this, the dinner is over. The vultures have been fed, or starved. Depending on how you look at it, I know they hurt you. I know they made you feel small. I know they called you a charity case until you started to believe it yourself. But I need you to know why I left you the house. It is not because I pity you. It is not because I want to help you. It is because you are the only one of them who knows how to build a home. You are the only one who came here to give, not to take. You are the only one who looked at me and saw a person, not a bank account. You were never a charity case. Isla, you were the only real thing in this family. Do not let them back in. Not out of guilt, not out of obligation. You have paid your dues. You are free. Love, Grandma. I stood there in the quiet room, holding the letter. I didn't cry. The tears I had shed for 7 years had dried up. In their place was something stronger, something harder. I was free. I folded the letter and put it in my pocket. I closed the drawer and locked it. I put the key back in my clutch. I walked back out to the garden. The scene hadn't changed. They were still sitting there, frozen in the amber of their own humiliation. I walked up to the table. I didn't sit down. I stood behind my chair, looking down at them. I looked at Carol. You told me once that I was an investment that didn't pay off. I said, my voice was calm. It sounded like a stranger's voice. You were wrong. I paid off tonight. Carol looked away, her face a mask of misery. I looked at Bree. You can keep the money. Bree, I said, if you sign the paper, if you admit what you did, but you will never step foot in this house again. Not for Christmas. Not for Thanksgiving. You lost that right when you bet on my divorce, Bree sobbed, hiding her face in her hands. And then, I turned to Xavier. He looked up at me. His eyes were red. He looked pathetic. He looked like a man who was waiting for me to save him, because that is what I had always done. I was the fixer. I was the soft one. Isla, he whispered, babe, please, we can fix this. I did it for us. I looked at his hand, resting on the white tablecloth. I looked at the gold band on his finger. I reached up and took hold of my own ring. The diamond was modest. I had loved it once. I had stared at it for hours when he proposed, thinking it was a promise. Now, I saw it for what it was, a prop, a shackle. I slid the ring off my finger. It felt cold. I did not throw it. I did not make a scene. I simply placed it on the table, right next to the white envelope that contained the evidence of his betrayal. I am not a charity case, Xavier, I said, and I am certainly not a sinking ship. He reached for my hand, but I pulled back. You bet against me. I said, you bet $50 that I would fail. You bet that I was weak. You bet that I would fold. I leaned in close, so only he could hear the final verdict. You can choose my family to win. Xavier, you can conspire with them. You can try to steal from an old woman, but you lost because you made one fatal mistake. He stared at me, his lip trembling. What you thought I would always beg to belong. I said, you thought I needed this marriage more than I needed my dignity. I straightened up. I looked at Grandma Marlene. She was watching me with a fierce, burning pride. I walked over to her. I kissed her on the cheek. I will see you tomorrow. Grandma, I said, I will come by to help you with the garden. Then I turned and walked away. I walked past Xavier. I walked past the stunned neighbors. I walked down the path lined with lanterns, my heels clicking on the stone. I heard Xavier call my name. Isla, wait. I didn't turn around. I kept walking. I walked to my car, got in, and started the engine. As I pulled out of the driveway, I looked in the rearview mirror one last time. I saw the house, my house, glowing in the night. I saw the string lights, and I saw Grandma Marlene, sitting at the head of the table, opening her black notebook. She picked up her pen. She wrote a new line. Date, January 20th, 2026. Time, 8 p.m. Tonight. The charity case closed the file. Tonight, Isla chose herself. Thank you so much for listening to this story on Juliet Revenge Stories. It was a wild ride, and I really hope you enjoyed seeing Isla finally take back her power. I am curious. Where are you listening from right now? Are you tuning in from your kitchen? Your car? or maybe winding down in bed. Drop a comment below and let me know your location. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you enjoyed this takedown, please smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the hype button to help this story reach even more people who need a little justice in their lives. See you in the next one.